Greetings, loyal viewers, and welcome back to November in Bikini Bottom. So I'm not going to dwell too long with this one, we're just going to get right into it. This is a video that, unlike most videos I reacted to, I'm definitely familiar with. In fact, upon its initial upload 6 years ago, I definitely watched it quite a few times, as a matter of fact. But I haven't watched it in quite some time since then. Like, I'd say for at least about a couple of years, give or take. So, we're watching the Spongebob Squarepants games episode on Did You Know Gaming. I really should check out more of what they've done recently, because I definitely did watch this channel quite a bit several years ago, back when there really weren't as many gaming channels dedicated to the behind-the-scenes development process of games. Nowadays, there's a lot more of them, but back then, there surprisingly weren't quite as many as you might think there were. Like, sure, there are some that I definitely am very familiar with that sadly are no longer around, like All Your History Are Belong to Us. That, along with machinima.com, is pretty much dead now, which is kind of sad. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell on stuff like that too much here, so without further ado, let's get it on! Oh, also, just before we get started, though there are definitely some things about this that I don't fully remember, there is one part at the end talking about Revenge of the Flying Dutchman that I actually do remember, that I do want to talk about briefly when we get to that point. So anyway, like I said, let's get started. I'll have to mute this because of copyright, you know, the opening theme there.
Did you know, in Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom, the attack of the tubulant robot enemies changes when the game is played on specific holidays. On New Year's Day, they shoot
to anyone who's played the remake, does that happen in the remake? I never played it on any of those specific holidays.
On July 4th, the American Independence Day, they're red, white, and blue. And on Halloween, the flames are orange. Another interesting secret
in the original, they look more yellow than they do orange.
Sculptures at the edge of the level is a reference to a
in fact, they look more yellow than SpongeBob himself.
An Atari 2600 controller. Battle for Bikini
That's
Bottom
actually kind of cool. I do like that.
The base of a previous game by developer Heavy Iron Studios, Scooby-Doo: Night of 100 Frights. The Xbox version of Battle
I've never
for
played
Bikini
that,
Bottom
nor the original Battle for Bikini Bottom, but I am kind of interested. I do know the character models in that game are often used a lot in animated shorts, like with Devil Artemis. He's used those models quite a few times.
Patrick using the anchor arms from one of the cutscenes. It was partially programmed and would have been defeated by Patrick throwing debris.
I'm still so disappointed that they didn't implement these cut features into the remake. That would have been so cool.
Can be found in the game's files, and it is attributed to SpongeBob in the file name. The smelly Sunday from the Season 2 episode Something Smells was originally planned to be a power-up as well. It's possible to hack the effects of the Sunday back into the game, and it allows SpongeBob and Patrick to break stone tikis with their regular attack. The game's data
that one
also
I can kind of understand them cutting.
Sequence for Patrick in SpongeBob's dream level. It's based on candy and food, and it has a few early assets like the tikis that differ from those in the final game. An entire robot boss fight was also cut from the game. Like Sandy, Patrick, and SpongeBob, Squidward was also going to have his own robot boss.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there for a second. Of all the things that they did technically restore for the remake, they did bring that back, but they instead of reworking that into the actual story of the game, the story mode, I guess you could say, they instead forced it into this horde mode, multiplayer mode instead, which in my opinion was a pretty lame use for it, because I tried a little bit of that. It wasn't very good. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Concept art of the boss fight can be found in the movie theater, and it appears as though SpongeBob would have fought the robot by pressing switches and dropping rocks on it. There are unused
Which again, there's no reason why they couldn't implement that into the remake.
Like that. It was cut early in development. The Game Boy Advance version of the game still includes the robot Squidward boss fight in the final version. The Spongebob Squarepants movie game has many interesting secrets as well. In the level Welcome to Planktopolis, Minion,
it was a surprisingly solid movie tie-in
best records for the time trial levels in a secret spot. A hidden alcove can be reached by heading to a high ledge that overlooks a lava pit across from 2 large plankton statues. Falling off the ledge next to the wall will lead players to a hidden spot where after a few moments a window will pop up displaying the time.
How many people before this video ever actually discovered that?
In the Shell City
I know I certainly did.
A license plate can be found among the piles of garbage that reads HDYIRN, an abbreviation of
that's actually kind of cute.
About the game has to do with Patrick's underwear. Even though it's never seen in-game, fans
Patrick, you've been wearing the same Goofy Goober under...
fully textured Goofy Goober
damn it, I can't remember how the whole line goes, but...
Later in the game,
yeah,
SpongeBob
apparently in the movie he was wearing those same underwear for 3 years straight.
In the movie, he's never actually referred to by name. This is likely because
I did think that was kind of weird.
Lacked the licensing rights to use his name and likeness. Instead, the character just vaguely resembles David Hasselhoff.
I'm not a lifeguard.
I'm not a lifeguard, but I play one on TV.
The line, "I'm not a lifeguard, but I play
Which is
on
true,
TV," references Hasselhoff's role as a lifeguard on the TV drama Baywatch. The SpongeBob Squarepants
Which is what the SpongeBob movie was clearly spoofing.
Workaround for the licensing issues. Rather than referring to Hasselhoff's
character
as a
I
lifeguard,
think parody would be more
treated
appropriate.
as a mythical beast, and his name is censored with
paying homage to. That's why I meant.
Unlike the console version, the PC version of the SpongeBob Squarepants movie game is a point-and-click adventure.
I want to stop there for a second. Yeah, funnily enough, I actually remember playing this a little bit at my cousin's house back in like 2005, because where I definitely played most of the console versions by Heavy Iron Studios, which, like I said, it's a surprisingly solid movie tie-in game. It's basically a smaller, in many respects, it's basically a smaller version of Battle for Bikini Bottom in terms of its overall content, but it plays the same, has the same models, all that stuff. It's following, albeit very loosely, to the movie that's based on. But anyway, yeah, I do remember playing a little bit of this. I think there's a reason why, even now, I'm not really into point-and-click adventure games, because, yeah, and why for a while they were pretty much gone up to that point, up until in recent years, of course. But anyway, let's get back to the video.
And it also contains references to PC games from the past. During the 5th chapter, when SpongeBob tries to leave the bounds of the level and enter areas blocked by fog, he says,
"It's too foggy to see. I could get eaten by a Gru."
This is a reference to Zork,
what even
the
is
classic
a Gru?
1980 text-based adventure game. In Zork, if
I might have to
players
look
tried
that
to
up.
explore dark areas without a source of light, the game would warn, "It's pitch black. You are likely to be eaten by a Gru." The SpongeBob Squarepants movie game was briefly available for the PlayStation 3 as a digital download under the PS3 Classics line. Unfortunately, this port was rushed and sloppy. The resolution
Very much
was
so.
stuck on
Like,
stretch,
me and my brother
meaning
both
players
remember
had to
playing
manually set
that
the
for a little
resolution
while
every time they
on
played.
his
The audio and
PS3
video
at
would
the
become
time.
desynchronized
And,
during
yeah,
cutscenes
it was
with
bad.
delays of over a second between the animations and sound.
You have got to try this new dog broom game.
Wow, that is bad. That is bad.
And there was noticeable input lag, which caused problems during platforming and combat. The game was pulled off the PlayStation Store relatively soon after being released without an official explanation, but most gamers assumed it was due to the technical issues.
Among other reasons, but yeah, that's probably the most likely one.
SpongeBob Squarepants' first appearance in a major video game wasn't a game of its
I actually
own,
played
but
that
a
for the
kart
first
racer
time a
called
few years ago,
Nicktoons Racing.
and
It was
it's a
first released for the
surprisingly
Game
fun
Boy
kart
Color,
racer
but
for the
subsequent
PS1.
versions came out for the Game Boy Advance and the original PlayStation.
Though, let's
There
face
was
it,
even a
CTR,
full-sized
it certainly
arcade
is
version,
not.
complete with a chair in the shade of Nickelodeon orange. Speaking of ensemble-style games, SpongeBob was cited by Super Smash Bros. Creator Masahiro Sakurai to be a very popular request for a new playable fighter. Unfortunately, Sakurai shot down any hopes of the
I was definitely naive back then, but in hindsight, this just seems like common sense.
From Dragon Ball.
Because he's not a video game character.
Are impossible to implement. The game SpongeBob SquarePants Creature from the Krusty Krab had a feature that was prevented from being added because of guidelines from the licensor. Andrew Oliver of Blitz Games had originally planned for the Wii version to have shooter-style segments that used the Wii
isn't Blitz Games
like a gun.
isn't even his Blitz Games even still
around?
against
it. Oliver explained,
"It's a cartoon license, and Nickelodeon were uncomfortable with shooting. It's not that we couldn't,
because
but
why the hell
risk
not?
If we went down that route and were told it couldn't go in. When you're aiming for a launch title, you don't need to confront obvious approval worries.
Probably for the best." Oh, yeah.
One SpongeBob SquarePants game was so flawed that it may have led to the closure of the studio that created it.
Stop. Okay, this is what I was talking about earlier before we started the video. There's a lot to unpack there, but long story short, that's not the reason why Big Sky Interactive went defunct. The real reason, like I said, long story short, was that basically THQ wanted them to continue making Nickelodeon licensed games after this, for some reason. They refused. I think the big reason being that they simply wanted to move on to other projects, which is understandable, but this ended up causing THQ to, in a very petty response, act spitefully and basically blacklisted them from receiving work from other publishers at the time. So, yeah, that's why they went defunct, which is kind of sad, because for as bad as this was, and especially as bad as the Jimmy Neutron game was, which was also done by Big Sky Interactive, I think they probably, if circumstances were more in their favor, as they do address in this segment, if I'm remembering correctly, that had the circumstances been different, I think they could have at least done something competent, but whatever. I'm at least hoping that some people who worked at Big Sky Interactive ended up working at other studios sometime after the fact, because otherwise this would be a very sad end to many people working there who, from what I can tell, they did seem, despite the internal issues, they were definitely passionate about working on it, which I can't say I blame them. I love SpongeBob, and I would definitely love to work on a SpongeBob game at any point in my life, but oh well. Let's go ahead and finish the video.
SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, developed by Big Sky Interactive, had generally poor reviews all around, but the PlayStation 2 version was particularly problematic.
Which is unfortunately the version I was stuck with growing
between
up.
different areas, and it caused players to actually
Not that the
lose their
GameCube
save
version
files.
is much better,
the poor
but
quality
still.
and bugs may have been due to internal problems the studio faced during development. Big Sky Interactive
like I
was
said, this
originally
part
the
was
American
definitely
branch
true.
of a French company called Callisto Entertainment. While the studio was in the middle of creating another game based on a Nickelodeon franchise, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, their French parent company filed
this one,
for
in some
bankruptcy,
respects,
having
was
all
even
the resources
worse.
available to continue
Like,
the operation
say
on
what
their
you will
own.
about the
American
character
branch
models in
split and became
Revenge of the
Big
Flying
Sky
Dutchman,
Interactive.
but
Soon
at least
after
they,
that, Big Sky
at least
heard
the
that
faces
Nickelodeon was looking for a
moved
developer to bring
most of the
SpongeBob
time
to the
anyway.
PS2 and GameCube. Many members of Big Sky were huge fans of SpongeBob, and the studio needed work, so they created a demo using the code from Jimmy Neutron. In an interview at E3 2002, Big Sky Interactive co-founder Matt Scabilla explained,
a handful of people,
you could definitely
mostly
tell that they
artists,
cut
took the
corners
technology
to
we'd been working
make
on and
this
created a
demo
full
as
working
fast as they
level of
could.
SpongeBob in 2 weeks, with gameplay, platforms, animations, a collection of items, and a working HUD. While the competition may have had a design doc or some models, we had a full
what
playable
most
demo
companies
working
would,
on the target
which is
platform.
normally to be
they landed
expected
the
for
contract and developed
most
the game,
companies.
but unfortunately, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman sold very poorly after the negative reception. The game was the last project by Big Sky Interactive, and Nickelodeon partnered with Heavy Iron Studios for future SpongeBob projects.
Yeah, and the
Don't
poor
forget to
sales and
subscribe to
whatnot
Did You Know
is
Gaming for
especially
more facts
telling,
and
because
trivia. And
keep
if
in
you like
mind,
this
in
video,
2002,
give it a like.
the internet
If you
was
like
nowhere near what it is nowadays, for better or for worse. So, yeah. By the way, have there been sounds going on in the background this whole time while we were reacting to the video? 'Cause I'm hearing some sounds. Might just be my neighbors. I don't know what's going on, but either way, So yeah, that was the Did You Know Gaming for Spongebob Squarepants games. It was definitely interesting returning to that after a long while of having watched it. But I'm kind of glad I did. But I also am hopefully I've managed to not fully, but basically correct the mistake of why Big Sky Interactive ended up closing its doors. Because the real reason why, I gotta say, like I mentioned before, is pretty sad. Because again, I think if things had been different, they could have done something competent then, and I think they could have gone on to do something competent after the fact. But oh well, that's just kind of what happens more often than not in the entertainment industry, unfortunately, which does kind of bum me out. But it's all in the past at this point. And again, I'm at least hoping that those people eventually went on to do other things, because little known fact, the original director for Enter the Dragonfly, who ended up leaving halfway through production, if that says anything about how that game's development, how badly that game's development went, that he years later would go on to be he would go on to work on Insomniac's Spider-Man. So that's definitely quite the glow up in your career. Which I think something similar like that could have happened here, but I don't know. But yeah, I also mentioned earlier that I did play a bit of Nicktoons Racing on PS1 via PS3, granted, but for what it is, it was definitely a fun kart racing game. Definitely a lot better than the more recent Nickelodeon kart racing games we've had with 1, 2, and now 3. How they keep making enough money to make not 1 but 2 sequels when the first one was utter garbage is beyond me. I don't know. But anyway, we just have one more video to get to for this month, and we'll be getting to that on Wednesday night. So yeah, that's about all the time we got. If you liked the video, go ahead and comment, like, endorse, subscribe, and if you have any suggestions, leave some down in the comment section below. And as always, I'm King Gargantuas, and take care.